Harrison Technologies occupied floors 40 through 50 of the Metropolitan Tower in downtown Chicago. The company, valued at $3.2 billion, was a leader in cybersecurity software. Floor 50, the executive level, gleamed with glass walls, modern art, and the quiet hum of power and money. Richard Harrison, 58, had built this empire from nothing. He'd started in his garage 30 years ago, coding software while working 2 jobs to support his family. Now he was one of the most respected CEOs in tech, known not just for his business acumen, but for his integrity and how he treated employees. His son, however, was a different story. Brandon Harrison, 26, stood in his father's corner office, arms crossed, radiating entitled frustration. He'd graduated from an Ivy League school with mediocre grades. The Harrison name had helped more than his performance. For the past 2 years, he'd held the title Executive Vice President of Strategic Development, a position his father had created to give him responsibility without letting him damage anything critical. "I don't understand why you won't just make me COO," Brandon complained. "I've been here 2 years. I've put in my time." Richard looked up from his laptop, his patience visibly thinning. "You've attended meetings and taken credit for other people's work. That's not the same as earning a position." "I'm your son. This company should be mine." "This company will be yours when you prove you deserve it. Right now you don't." Richard's voice was firm. "You treat the support staff like servants. You take 3-hour lunches. You've made 4 assistants quit in 2 years. That's not leadership, Brandon. That's entitlement." Brandon's face flushed. "Those people are paid to support me. Those people have names. They have families. They have dignity. And if you can't see them as human beings worthy of respect, you're not ready to lead anything." Richard closed his laptop. "I'm giving you 1 month. Prove to me you can be a leader worth following. Show me you understand what built this company. Hard work, respect, and integrity. If you can't, I'm removing you from the executive track." "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious. 1 month, Brandon. Show me who you really are." Brandon stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Richard sighed heavily. He'd built an empire but was failing at something more important, raising a son with character. He picked up his phone and made a call. "Margaret, it's Richard. I need your help with something." At 6 a.m. the next morning, a woman in her late 60s arrived at Harrison Technologies. She wore a simple blue custodial uniform with the name Rose embroidered on the pocket. She carried cleaning supplies and wore comfortable shoes. Everything about her suggested a woman who'd worked hard her whole life. The security guard at the front desk smiled warmly. "Good morning, Rose. You're the new night shift supervisor?" "Day shift, actually. I'll be covering floors 48 through 50 for the next few weeks." Her voice was kind, her smile genuine. "The executive floors? Good luck up there. Some of those folks—" He lowered his voice. "Let's just say they don't always remember to say thank you." Rose chuckled. "I've worked a lot of places. I can handle it." What the security guard didn't know, what no one except Richard Harrison knew, was that Rose was actually Margaret Chen, 67, venture capitalist worth $2.4 billion. She'd made her fortune in early tech investments and now spent her time mentoring entrepreneurs and occasionally conducting character assessments for old friends. Richard and Margaret had history. 25 years ago, when Richard was struggling to get Harrison Technologies off the ground, Margaret had been his first investor. She'd believed in him when no one else would. She'd also taught him that how you treat people when they can't benefit you reveals your true character. Now Richard had asked her to help him assess his son. Margaret had agreed immediately. "If your boy has character, we'll find it," she'd told Richard. "And if he doesn't, better you know now, before he destroys what you've built." At 8:30 a.m., Margaret was cleaning the 50th floor conference room when Brandon arrived, talking loudly on his phone. "Yeah, I don't care what the developers say. Tell them to make it work. That's what they're paid for. No, I won't be on the call. I have a golf tee time at noon. Because I said so, handle it." He ended the call and noticed Margaret emptying the trash can. "You're new," he said, not as a greeting, but as an accusation. Margaret looked up with a warm smile. "Yes, sir, I'm Rose. Started today?" "Well, Rose, you missed a spot." He pointed to a barely visible coffee ring on the table. "And the windows have streaks. This is the executive floor. Standards matter." "Of course, I'll take care of it right away." Margaret pulled out her cleaning cloth. "See that you do. My father has important clients coming in today. We can't have the place looking like it's cleaned by amateurs." He walked toward the door, then turned back. "And Rose, in the future, if executives are working in a room, come back later. We shouldn't have to work around the help." Margaret's smile never faltered. "Understood, Mr. Harrison." After he left, Margaret made a note on her phone. 10-minute interaction. No eye contact, no please or thank you. Referred to service staff as the help. Character assessment, poor start. Over the next week, Margaret observed Brandon carefully. She cleaned his office, the conference rooms he used, the executive lounge. She was invisible to him, which was exactly what she wanted. Day 2. Brandon left his lunch trash on his desk with a note. "Clean this up." No please, no acknowledgement that she was a person who deserved basic courtesy. Day 3. Brandon was showing his office to someone he wanted to impress. "See, corner office, executive floor. I basically run this place. My father's getting old. It'll all be mine soon." When Margaret came in to empty the trash, he didn't pause his conversation. He simply waved his hand dismissively, motioning for her to hurry up and leave. Day 4. Brandon spilled coffee on the floor and didn't tell anyone. Margaret discovered it hours later, dried and sticky. When she mentioned it to him, he shrugged. "That's what we pay you for." Day 5. Margaret overheard him on the phone with his father. "No, I haven't learned anyone's name. Why would I? The support staff turns over constantly. It's not worth the effort." By the end of the first week, Margaret's assessment was clear. Brandon Harrison treated service workers as invisible, inferior, and irrelevant. He showed no gratitude, no respect, no acknowledgement of their humanity. But Margaret believed in thorough testing. 1 week wasn't enough. She wanted to see if there was any depth beneath the surface. Week 2, Margaret decided to engage more directly. She was cleaning the executive lounge when Brandon came in for coffee. She decided to speak to him. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Brandon barely glanced at her. "Sure." "I was wondering if I could ask you something." He looked annoyed. "What?" "My granddaughter is interested in computers. She's very bright, but we don't have money for fancy schools. Do you have any advice for a young person trying to get into technology?" Brandon stared at her like she'd asked him to solve a physics equation. "I don't know. Tell her to go to college. Isn't that obvious?" "We can't afford college. I was thinking maybe an apprenticeship or, look, Rose, I don't have time for this." I'm sure there are programs for people like you. Google it. He grabbed his coffee and walked away. Margaret made another note. Asked for mentorship advice. Response: dismissive, unhelpful, showed no empathy. Suggested people like you should figure it out themselves. Week 3 brought the incident that would define Brandon's character assessment. Margaret was cleaning the hallway outside Brandon's office when she accidentally knocked over her bucket. Soapy water spread across the floor. "Oh no," Margaret muttered, immediately grabbing towels to clean it up. Brandon's door opened. He looked at the mess, then at Margaret, his face contorting with anger. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted. "Do you have any idea how incompetent you have to be to spill an entire bucket?" "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison. It was an accident. I'll clean it up right away." "An accident? This is the executive floor. We can't have accidents up here." His voice carried down the hallway. Other executives peered out of their offices. "You know what? I'm calling facilities management. This is unacceptable." Margaret knelt on the floor, mopping up water. "Please, sir, it was an honest mistake. I've been doing this job for many years." "Well, maybe you're too old to be doing it anymore." Brandon's voice was cruel. "Maybe it's time for you to retire and let someone competent take over." Sarah Mitchell, a junior executive, approached cautiously. "Brandon, it's just a spill. Let her clean it up." "Stay out of this, Sarah." "She's an elderly woman doing her best. There's no need to humiliate her." Brandon turned on Sarah. "When you're running this company, you can have opinions. Until then, mind your own business." Sarah knelt down next to Margaret, helping her clean. "Here, let me help you." "Thank you, dear," Margaret said softly, genuine gratitude in her voice. Brandon watched with disgust. "You're actually helping the janitor. What's next, Sarah? Are you going to do her job for her?" "I'm helping a human being who had an accident. Maybe you should try it sometime. Maybe you should remember who signs your performance reviews." Brandon turned and walked back into his office, slamming the door. Sarah helped Margaret finish cleaning. "I'm sorry about him. He's not a good person." "It's all right, dear. I've dealt with worse." Margaret patted her hand. "Thank you for your kindness. What's your name?" "Sarah Mitchell. I'm in business development." "Well, Sarah Mitchell, you're going places, not because of your job title, but because you have something money can't buy: character." After Sarah left, Margaret made extensive notes. Spill test failed catastrophically. Showed cruelty, ageism, abuse of power. Threatened employee who showed kindness. No empathy, no humanity, no recognition of mistakes as part of being human. She texted Richard, "We need to talk." That evening, Richard sat in his office with Margaret, who'd changed out of her janitor uniform and back into her regular clothes, an elegant suit that reflected her actual status. "Tell me," Richard said, his voice heavy. Margaret pulled out her tablet, showing him 3 weeks of notes, photos, recordings. "Your son is not ready to lead this company. More than that, he's not ready to be trusted with power over other people." She played him audio recordings, Brandon calling staff the help, Brandon dismissing Sarah's kindness, Brandon mocking Margaret for asking about opportunities for her granddaughter. Richard's face grew grayer with each example. "The spill incident was the final test," Margaret said. "I wanted to see how he'd react when someone made a genuine mistake. Would he show compassion, understanding, basic human decency? He didn't. No, he showed cruelty. He insulted my age. He threatened an employee who helped me. He used his power to humiliate someone he perceived as powerless. Margaret's voice was sad but firm. Richard, I've assessed hundreds of executives in my career. I can tell you with certainty, your son lacks the fundamental character required for leadership. I was afraid of that. The good news, character can be developed. He's young, he can change, but not by being handed power he hasn't earned. He needs to learn what you learned starting from the bottom, understanding every role, respecting every person. Richard nodded slowly. I know what I have to do. The next morning, Richard called Brandon into his office. Margaret was there, no longer in her janitor uniform, sitting in a chair by the window. Brandon entered confidently. Morning, Dad. Listen, I've been thinking about the COO position. He stopped, noticing Margaret. Who's this? Brandon, this is Margaret Chen. She's one of our board members and was my first investor 30 years ago. Brandon's confusion was evident. Okay, nice to meet you, I guess, but why is she here? Sit down, Brandon. Something in Richard's tone made Brandon sit. For the past 3 weeks, Richard began, Margaret has been working in this building. She's been observing you, testing your character. Brandon's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Margaret spoke up. Hello, Mr. Harrison. We've actually met several times. You called me Rose. I was the janitor on your floor. The color drained from Brandon's face. You were the elderly woman you called too old to work. The woman whose question about helping her granddaughter you dismissed. The woman you screamed at for spilling water. Margaret's voice was calm but devastating. Yes, that was me. This is insane. Brandon turned to his father. You had someone spy on me? I had someone assess whether you're ready for leadership. The answer is no. Because I was rude to a janitor? Dad, come on. Because you treated a human being with cruelty. Because you showed zero empathy, zero respect, zero recognition that service workers are people. Richard's voice was hard. But more than that, you showed who you are when you think no one important is watching. And that, son, is the truest measure of character. Margaret pulled out her tablet. Would you like to hear the recordings? See the notes? Brandon's face went from pale to red. No, she was just a janitor. She's a billionaire, Richard said flatly. Worth more than our company. She's on our board. She's one of the most respected investors in the industry. And you treated her like garbage because you thought she was powerless. The implications crashed over Brandon. I didn't know exactly, Margaret said. You didn't know who I was, so you showed me who you are. Someone who treats people well only when they can benefit you. Someone who uses power to humiliate rather than uplift. Someone who sees service workers as inferior rather than essential. Dad, I can change. I'm sure you can, but not here, not now. Richard pulled out a folder. You're being removed from the executive track. You'll be reassigned to an entry-level position in customer support. What? You'll answer customer service calls. You'll solve problems. You'll report to a team leader who doesn't know you're my son. You'll earn $45,000 a year, the same as everyone else at that level. You can't do this. I can and I am. You'll work there for 1 year minimum. If you can show genuine growth, genuine change, genuine respect for every person, regardless of their position, we'll discuss your future. If you can't, you'll need to find employment elsewhere. Brandon looked desperately at Margaret. You can't let him do this. This is humiliating. How do you think I felt when you called me too old to work? When you dismissed my question about helping my granddaughter? When you made me kneel on the floor while you screamed at me? Margaret's eyes were steel. You want to talk about humiliation? I gave you 3 weeks to show basic human decency. You failed every single test. There's one more thing, Richard added. I'm donating your salary, the difference between what you were making and what you'll make now, to a scholarship fund for children of service workers, in your name. This is insane. This is accountability. Richard stood. You have 2 choices. Accept this reassignment and learn what it means to work without privilege, or leave this company and find your own way. What's it going to be? Brandon sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Finally, he whispered, I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. Dismissed. After Brandon left, Margaret turned to Richard. That took courage. He's my son. I love him, but love means holding people accountable, not protecting them from consequences. Do you think he'll stay? Richard sighed. I don't know, but I hope so, because if he stays, there's a chance he might learn. And if he learns, he might become the leader this company deserves. That night, Brandon sat in his luxury apartment, staring at his phone. Half of him wanted to quit, to storm out, to prove his father wrong by succeeding somewhere else. But the other half kept replaying the recordings Margaret had played. Hearing his own voice, the cruelty, the dismissiveness, the casual dehumanization, he sounded like someone he didn't want to be. He thought about Sarah, the junior executive who'd knelt to help clean up water. She hadn't hesitated. She'd just helped. Because it was the right thing to do. When was the last time Brandon had done something simply because it was right? He picked up his phone and called his father. I'll take the position. You will? On one condition, I want to apologize to Rose, to Margaret, in person. Richard was quiet for a moment. I'll ask her. 2 days later, Brandon met Margaret at a coffee shop. She arrived in her business attire, every inch the billionaire investor she actually was. Brandon stood when she approached. Ms. Chen, thank you for meeting me. They sat. For a long moment, Brandon just looked at his coffee, gathering courage. I'm sorry, he finally said. I'm sorry for how I treated you, for the things I said, for how I made you feel. There's no excuse. I was cruel and I was wrong. Margaret studied him carefully. Why are you apologizing? Because your father made you? Or because you actually understand what you did wrong? Both, honestly. At first, I was just angry. Angry at you for testing me. Angry at my dad for the demotion. But then I listened to those recordings, really listened. And I heard myself, his voice cracked. I sounded like a monster. I treated you like you weren't even human. And the worst part? It wasn't an act. That's actually who I'd become. Why? What made you that way? Brandon thought carefully. I think I never had to struggle. Everything was handed to me. My father's name opened every door. I never had to earn respect, so I never learned to give it. I never had to work hard, so I never valued hard work in others. I was so focused on being important that I forgot the most important thing, being decent. Margaret nodded slowly. That's good self-awareness, but self-awareness doesn't mean much without change. So my question is, what are you going to do differently? I'm taking the customer service job, and I'm going to do it right. Not as the CEO's son serving time, but as someone who actually wants to learn. He looked at her directly. I want to understand what my father understands, what you understand, that every person matters. That character is built from the bottom up, not the top down. It won't be easy. I know, but maybe that's the point. Margaret smiled for the first time. Your father was right about one thing. You do have potential. You're just 26. You have time to become someone worth being. She stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. That question I asked you about my granddaughter wanting to get into tech? Yes, it was real. I do have a granddaughter. She's brilliant, from a low-income family, dreams of being a software engineer. You dismissed her dream in 5 seconds because it wasn't convenient for you. Shame flooded Brandon's face. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize to me. Do something. You're starting in customer support. Good, learn those systems. Then volunteer to teach underprivileged kids about technology. Use your privilege to open doors for people who don't have your advantages. That's how you repay the debt. I will, I promise. Margaret extended her hand. Then I'll be watching your progress, Mr. Harrison. Prove me wrong about you. Prove that character can be learned. Brandon shook her hand firmly. I will. Brandon Harrison sat in a cubicle on the 12th floor, wearing a headset, answering customer service calls. He'd been there for 6 months, and it had been the hardest 6 months of his life. He'd learned what it meant to be yelled at by frustrated customers, to solve the same problem 30 times a day, to have no power, no influence, no special treatment, to be, in essence, invisible. He'd also learned what it meant to have coworkers. Real coworkers who didn't know his last name opened doors. They'd taught him their shortcuts, covered his breaks, invited him to lunch. He'd learned their names, their stories, their dreams. His team leader, Patricia, was a single mother of 3 who'd worked her way up from data entry over 15 years. She was tough, fair, and the best leader Brandon had ever worked for. Harrison, she called out, got a tough customer on line 7. Think you can handle it? I'll try. Brandon took the call. On the other end was an elderly man, frustrated and confused by a software issue. 6 months ago, Brandon would have been impatient, dismissive. But now he understood something fundamental. This man wasn't an inconvenience. He was a human being who needed help. Let's solve this together, sir, Brandon said gently. I'm going to walk you through it step by step. Take your time, we'll get there. 20 minutes later, the issue was resolved. The man thanked him profusely. You're a patient young man. Your parents raised you right. After the call, Brandon sat back, feeling something unfamiliar. Purpose. Patricia approached. Nice work. That could have been a nightmare, but you kept him calm. Thanks, Patricia. You've come a long way, Brandon. When you started, you were rough around the edges, but you've really grown. You care about the customers now. You care about the team. That's what makes a good employee. Someday, that's what'll make a good leader. She didn't know she was talking to the CEO's son. To her, he was just another team member who'd found his footing. That night, Brandon volunteered at a community center, teaching basic computer skills to underprivileged kids. Margaret's granddaughter was in the class, brilliant, eager, full of potential. Mr. Brandon, she asked after class, how did you learn all this? Practice, patience, and good people who believed in me even when I didn't deserve it. He smiled. You're going to go far, Lily, I can tell. Because I'm smart? Because you're kind. Smart is good, but kind is better. Don't ever forget that. Richard called a special board meeting. Margaret attended, curious about the agenda. I want to discuss succession planning, Richard began. I'm not retiring yet, but I want to start preparing for the future. I'd like to propose my son, Brandon, for a VP position. There were murmurs around the table. Everyone knew about Brandon's demotion a year ago. Is he ready? One board member asked. Let me show you something. Richard pulled up performance reviews, customer satisfaction scores, team feedback. This is Brandon's work over the past year. 97% customer satisfaction. Highest problem resolution rate on his team. Mentor of the quarter 3 times. And here's something interesting. He started a volunteer program teaching tech skills to underprivileged kids. Completely unpaid, completely his idea. Margaret smiled, impressed. But more than numbers, Richard continued, here's what his team leader said. He read from Patricia's evaluation. Brandon Harrison is one of the best team members I've supervised in 15 years. He treats customers with patience, helps coworkers without being asked, and shows genuine care for people. He'd make an excellent leader because he understands what it means to serve. Richard looked around the table. Patricia wrote that without knowing Brandon was my son. She evaluated him purely on merit. That's the person I want to promote, not my son, the person who earned it. Margaret spoke up. I'd like to propose something. Before we vote, I want to share something. She pulled out her tablet. 15 months ago, I did a character assessment of Brandon. It was not good, but I believe in second chances, so I did another assessment last week. She'd returned to the 12th floor in her Rose persona, working as a janitor again. Brandon didn't recognize me. At first, I wore different glasses, changed my hair, but when he realized who I was, he didn't panic or try to impress me. He introduced me to his team, thanked me for keeping their floor clean, and asked if there was anything they could do to make my job easier. Margaret showed photos on her tablet. This is him having lunch with the custodial staff, asking about their families. This is him staying late to help a coworker with a difficult case. This is him at the community center with kids, including my granddaughter. She looked at Richard. Your son has changed, genuinely changed, not because he had to, but because he chose to. I support his promotion. The vote was unanimous. That evening, Richard called Brandon into his office, the same office where everything had changed 15 months ago. The board approved your promotion. You'll be VP of Customer Experience. Brandon's eyes widened. Dad, I don't know what to say. How about thank you? I learned that from a janitor once. Richard smiled. But seriously, this isn't nepotism. You earned this. Your work speaks for itself. I know, and that feels better than anything you could have just handed me. Brandon sat down. Can I ask you something? Why did you do it? The demotion, the whole thing. You could have just fired me, cut me loose. Because you're my son, and I love you. But more than that, I saw potential in you. I saw that underneath the entitlement was someone who could be good. You just needed to learn some hard lessons. I learned them, trust me. Brandon paused. Margaret told me she came back, that she tested me again. She did, and you passed. I didn't recognize her at first, but when I did, my first thought was panic. Like I'd failed some test I didn't know I was taking. But then I realized I hadn't done anything wrong. I just treated her like a human being, like I treat everyone now. And that's when I understood it wasn't a test, it was just Tuesday. That's who I am now. Richard felt tears sting his eyes. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too, not for the promotion, but because I look at myself in the mirror and I like who I see. That's worth more than any title. Brandon Harrison, now VP of Customer Experience, stood at a podium addressing Harrison Technologies' annual company meeting. His father sat in the front row, retired but still engaged. Margaret sat beside him, beaming. 3 years ago, Brandon began, I learned the most important lesson of my life. I learned it from a janitor who turned out to be a billionaire. But the lesson wasn't about her wealth or her status. It was about character. He looked at Margaret. She taught me that how you treat people when they can't benefit you reveals everything about who you really are. That power without compassion is just cruelty. That leadership isn't about being served, it's about serving others. Brandon pulled up a slide showing the company's new initiatives. That's why I'm announcing the Harrison Character Scholarship. We're funding college education for children of service workers, janitors, security guards, cafeteria staff, everyone who keeps this company running but often goes unnoticed because they matter. Their dreams matter. Their families matter. The room erupted in applause. I'm also announcing a new policy. Every new executive, including me, will spend their first month working in an entry-level position. Not as a formality, but as a genuine learning experience. You can't lead people whose jobs you don't understand. You can't value work you've never done. After the meeting, Margaret approached Brandon. Your father would be proud. Actually, he is proud. I can see it on his face. I'm just doing what you both taught me. You're doing more than that. You're passing it forward. That's the sign of true growth. She smiled. Remember when I asked you about helping my granddaughter? Of course. Lily's in her second year at Stanford now, studying computer science. On your scholarship? On the scholarship she earned. I just made it possible. Brandon paused. You know what she told me last week? She wants to come work here after graduation. Not because I helped her, but because she loves what this company stands for now. And what's that? That everyone matters, from the CEO to the custodian. That character matters more than credentials. That how you treat people defines who you are. Brandon smiled. Basically, everything you taught me while I thought you were just a janitor. Margaret laughed. Best character assessment I ever did. Best lesson I ever learned. As the crowd dispersed, Richard joined them. The three stood together, the CEO who'd built an empire on integrity, the billionaire who tested character, and the young man who'd learned that true power comes from lifting others up. Think he's ready to take over someday? Margaret asked Richard. I think, Richard said, watching his son shake hands with every employee in the room, from executives to maintenance staff, treating each person with genuine respect. I think he's more than ready. He's become the leader I always hoped he'd be. Not because you handed it to him, Margaret noted. No, because he earned it. The hard way, the right way, the only way that actually matters. Brandon approached them, grinning. Why are you all staring at me like I'm a science experiment? Because, Margaret said, you're proof that character can be taught, that people can change, that even entitled rich kids can become decent human beings. Brandon laughed. Thanks, I think. It's a compliment, trust me. As they walked out together, Brandon turned back one last time, looking at the company his father had built, that he would someday lead, but he wasn't looking at the executive floors or the corner offices. He was looking at the custodial staff, emptying trash, cleaning floors, doing the invisible work that kept everything running. He caught the eye of one janitor, an older woman, who reminded him of Margaret. He walked over. "Thank you for everything you do. This company doesn't run without you." The woman's face lit up with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." "What's your name?" "Maria." "Nice to meet you, Maria. I'm Brandon. If you ever need anything, resources for your family, help with your work, anything, my door is always open." After he walked away, Maria turned to her coworker, tears in her eyes. "Did that just happen?" "It did," her coworker said, equally amazed. "Things are different here now. People see us. We matter." And that, more than any profit margin or stock price, was Brandon Harrison's true legacy. He'd learned that the measure of a person isn't how they treat those above them, but how they treat those below them. And he'd learned it from a janitor who was really a billionaire, who taught him that everyone deserves respect, everyone has value, and character is the only currency that truly matters. How you treat people when they can't benefit you reveals who you really are, like if you believe character matters more than status. Comment: have you ever been treated poorly because of your job or appearance? Or have you witnessed someone showing kindness when they didn't have to? Share your story. Subscribe for stories about growth, redemption, and treating everyone with dignity. Share with someone who needs a reminder that everyone deserves respect, especially people in service roles. Drop a heart if you've ever been underestimated and proved people wrong. This story is fiction, but the lesson is real. Character is revealed in how you treat people who can do nothing for you. True leadership begins with service. Everyone you meet deserves dignity, no exceptions.